Why have we come to earth? Do you remember? Why have we taken birth? Do you remember?
What you're looking for, you're looking with. I love the bookshelf. One of my teachers used to say, if you found the book that would truly, truly, completely change your life, free you, and liberate you, would you buy it? Again. Because that book is already sitting on most of our bookshelves, one of those books. We're going to look at one of those books this whole month. It's called The Four Agreements. Some of you might have read this once, right? Or more than once, but how many have read The Four Agreements? Great. You even got a copy hanging there. Good for you. And so, I'll do the autographed copy. No, I'm not Don Miguel Ruiz, so I can't do the autographed copy. But anyway, it's a great book, and I like to go back to, once in a while, stuff like this. The Four Agreements is a good basis of how to live life. It's a good reminder. And I like to go back to basics once in a while to kind of get that groundwork for, how do we just live our lives? How do we live it on a basic day-to-day way that works for all of us? And to get back to that grounding, to get back to that foundational idea. I'm teaching the foundations class, as Reverend Mary said, and it's the foundations of our principles. It's more than just the history of New Thought or religious science. It's really our foundation principles. What are we based on? How do we, what is it we teach? We get into how to do five-step prayer and like that. And it's great I used to, when I was in religious science, take this class about once a year. And after I'd taken it about 5 or 6 times, I finally just became a teaching assistant because the church I was in was large enough. They had small groups who broke out, and I became that. But just as a refresher, as a bring myself back to that reminder. So this is what we're going to play with this month is the Four Agreements. Today I'm doing 2 different talks. I did the first agreement already at the first service. I'm kind of flipping the book backwards. I'm going to do chapter 1 at this service, and chapter 2, which is actually the first agreement I did at the first service. So you can get the CD, you can watch on the video. A couple people were here at the first service that came back. How many are here from the first service that came back? Great, thank you. And Mary's here, and Diana's here. But we're going to look at what comes before the first agreement today. What I want to say about the first agreement, if you've not done this before, is called Be Impeccable with Your Word. And most of us have an idea of impeccable meaning keep your word, have integrity with your word, but that's not exactly what Don Miguel Ruiz means by it. He really means by impeccable, be without sin, which is to say use your word to express the highest and greatest truth you can express. Use your word to lift up, to be life-affirming energy. Okay? And so I invite you to take a listen to the first talk when you get a chance, or to read, if you've got the book, to read the book. But it's use our word to lift up. What we're going to talk about in this service is what he calls the domestication of the planet. God, I hate that term. And he uses it just that way, just like we're a bunch of cattle that have been domesticated because, guess what? Moo, We are. We are living in a planetary dream. This is his premise. We are living in a planetary dream. And this idea of living in a planetary dream comes throughout a whole lot of indigenous cultures. Okay? The Hindus say that we are living in the dream of the Brahma. And it's so many thousands or whatever years long, and he finally wakes up, and it gets worse and worse and worse as it goes along until he finally wakes up. So there's that idea of that. The Hebrew people called it the Garden of Eden consciousness. We lived in a Garden of Eden. That was the dream time. That was the prior to separating for and getting understanding the tree of wisdom, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The Australian Aboriginals have they literally call it the dream time, that is the creation time. In the Chinese philosophy, it was called the time of the Yellow Emperor. We all have this, most of the cultures have this idea that there was a wonderful time way back when everybody lived at peace and harmony, and if we could just get back to that time. We still have that going on, by the way, don't we? If we could just, as America, get back to what we were in the 50s and early 60s before those damn hippies took over. If we could go back to just before, fill in the blank, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, somewhere in there. If we could just go back, there's this idea, if we could just go back to this once wonderful, peaceful time, how simple that life would be. And if we really think about it, if we really got time transported back, we would have what? The same old worries and the same stuff going on at that time as we do now. We're living in a collective dream. Until we awaken from the actual dream and the collective consciousness that we have created, the times won't change. So life is a dream, and we are the dreamer of our own individual life, and we are dreaming that dream within the dream of a larger world. We're living that dream within the dream of the world. We did not create the dream of the world, but we did accept it. We have, for the most part, agreed with that dream. Things are the way that they are. Okay? He says, in the dream of the planet, it is normal for humans to suffer, to live in fear, and to create emotional dramas. The outside dream is not a pleasant dream. It is a dream of violence, a dream of fear, a dream of war, a dream of injustice. The personal dream of humans will vary, but globally it is mostly a nightmare. If we look at human society, we see a place so difficult to live in because it is ruled by fear. Now, this is nothing new. Jesus said, I come that you may awaken, because most of you are sleeping and most of you are living in a nightmare. Okay? This is old. All mystics have been aware that we're mostly living in a nightmare. The Buddha said, I'm awake. I wake up from this dream, from this drama. And so Don Miguel Ruiz is just putting it in a different way. Does that dream that he talked about of injustice and all that stuff, does that sound familiar? You watched the news lately? Right? You know, and he's writing this book, what was it, about 20 years ago, I think, before all of our current, newest versions of injustice, right? We have new versions of injustice now. We had old versions back then. We had old versions before that. And until the dream shifts, we'll continue to have that. And then, once we're living in this dream, we start searching for heaven. We start searching for justice. We start searching for truth. We start searching for beauty. We start searching for love because we don't see them as already present. But we're like a fish sitting in the middle of the ocean searching for water. If we took the time to look in each other's eyes and see the love and see the beauty that lives within each of us, we would start to wake up from the dream. But we're taught what? Don't look too closely. Don't make too much contact. Don't make eye contact. Especially if we're guys, right? We don't sit in lingering eye contact with each other, do we? Thank you, Joey, for playing along. I knew I could do that to him because he's not playing in that same dream, but we're taught that. We're taught that. Our beliefs blind us, and so that we live in that fog that we talked about in the reading where we can't see any farther than our nose. We live in the fog of the personality's idea of who I am. The personality's idea of who I am. Not who I truly am. Not my divine nature. See, most of us, if we go outside of this room, and we say, you know what, I'm God. I'm one with God. I'm God in form on the planet. And let's say we go over to, well, I won't pick on anybody, but elsewhere in the community, and start saying that, how will you be looked at? Crazy. Blasphemy, etc. Who do you think you are? Our biggest fear is to be fully alive. Our biggest fear isn't death. Our biggest fear isn't even public speaking or public singing. Although both of those are expressions of aliveness. Our biggest fear is to be fully alive. Fully alive. Breathe that in. We have learned instead to live based on others. We've learned to live on others based on others' beliefs, demands, and perspectives. Right? You know what I'm talking about? We've done that in order to gain acceptance. As little kids, the most important thing is that mom and dad accept us, right? You don't want a mom and dad who don't accept you. That can be dangerous as a small child. And so I'll do anything. So we learn to be good enough for another person. We learn to be good enough for others. We learn to be good enough for our parents, for our siblings, for our teachers, for the priest or minister of our church that we may have grown up with, for our peers, for our boss, for our society, for our spouse, for our children, and for our idea of God. We learn to be good enough for that. You know, we've got in the news a wonderful example right now going on the planet of an agreement, an idea of agreement. The woman who in Kentucky was refusing to do marriage licenses for gay couples. So some of you have probably heard that on the news. And there's all sorts of furor around that stuff, around that whole process. You know, there's news cameras and there's people on both sides of it saying, you know, she's right, she's wrong, and all that stuff. What she's really doing is she's living out an agreement. She has an agreement with her church that she will live in alignment with their church, and they have an agreement that says that one of the core teachings of their version of Christianity is to be anti-homosexual. Okay? It's an agreement. Is it the truth? I don't think so, but it is their collective agreement. And in order to fit in order to belong to that, she's walking in alignment with that agreement. Now, before we judge her, how many of us have walked along in alignment with an agreement that maybe later on we kind of wake up to and say, I wasn't really thinking that one through, okay? So we've all done this. We all do this. But it's interesting to just watch the agreement. And for some people, you sit out there and go, that agreement makes no sense. We've lived agreements that make no sense, haven't we? We've all lived agreements that make no sense. Just to fit in with all these people. Take a breath. Shake that out if you need to. And so we eventually create an image of perfection. What I need to do to be perfect. And if we went around and asked everybody in this room what they needed to do to be perfect, and we could do a complete brain dump of everybody, it would all be different, wouldn't it? Okay? And none of us is living up to it because it's impossible to live up to. Right? When I was in ministerial school, we had an exercise where, first of all, we were asked, there was about 10 of us in the room, ministers in training, and we were asked, what are your expectations of yourself and your belief of how you should be as a minister? We filled 5 easel pages full, not just nicely lined up, I mean just crammed every single inch of paper with beliefs of what we should be as ministers, some of which were in conflict with each other. We should be celibate and just living our lives completely for God. We should have a healthy marriage. Okay. Those two don't work together. We should be completely dedicated to our congregation, available to them 24/7, 365. We should have healthy boundaries and take some personal time off so that we can be refreshed and don't burn out completely in conflict with each other, right? And then the next thing we did was, what do you think your congregants' expectations of you as a minister will be? Another 5 easel pages, okay? Some of which were in conflict. I remember my favorite one was, does not drink. The minister does not drink. The minister is the kind of person that I can sit down and have a beer with. Okay? Doesn't share any personal information. Gets real with the congregation and shares what's going on in their life. I mean, all this stuff. And there's no way to be perfect. And we laugh, and we all laughed, and we did laugh once we got it out there and took a look at it. But we all have that going on, not just on one little area, but in every single area of our life. What is perfect? And perfect is oftentimes in complete conflict with other ideas of perfect. And so then we wonder why we're not living full out. Because we're trying to be perfect, and we're feeling like failures, and we're judging ourselves, we're criticizing ourselves, and we're walking around with a big old hammer going bang, 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 I'm not perfect. And then we die. After domestication, it is no longer about being good enough for anybody else. We self-train. We are not good enough for ourselves because we don't fit with our own image of perfection. We cannot forgive ourselves for not being what we wish to be, or rather what we believe we should be. We cannot forgive ourselves for not being perfect. And again, just keep breathing. We become our own judge, and we become our own victim. We wear social masks in order to be accepted. I will not be who I really am. I'm not going to let you see who I really am because I want you to like me and accept me. Okay? We abuse ourselves. We do it with self-talk. A couple times Cynthia and I have been having conversations, and she's gotten much better, but early on it was like, I would say to her, don't talk to my best friend that way, because she's saying something about herself. I've done the same thing, by the way. But it's like, don't talk to my best friend that way. Don't talk to this person I love this way. And we do. We all do it, don't we? Or have done it. And then we do it with outer ways. You know, kids who do drugs and cigarettes are just doing it, they know better. But they're doing it to fit in, to be accepted by a certain peer group, right? You know, when I was in high school, early on in high school, I was one of the smart kids. I hung out with all those, and so I did everything that was necessary to be accepted by that group. Between my sophomore and junior year, I had a complete life change, let's just put it that way. And I picked up some new friends in junior year. New friends. And I did what was necessary to be accepted by those friends. And my old friends used to look at me and go, what the? I remember one of the girls I went to both grade school and high school with, in my yearbook wrote, I'm going to remember you back when you were a nice kid. Okay? Somebody else wrote, I don't think you're going to make it through college. I don't think you'll be alive that long. I mean, something quite to that effect. So we do stuff to become accepted. We do stuff to maintain our image of perfection. And sometimes when we finally decide to rebel, we do stuff that looks like what the rebels are doing to rebel against that dream, right? But we're still caught up in the dream and being accepted and somebody else's idea, rather than taking the time to listen to our true self. Rather than saying, wait, stop all the chatter. Who am I really? Who am I really? Self-abuse comes from self-rejection. And that comes from our image of perfection, which we can't meet. If we never measure up to our image of perfection, we reject ourselves. And it's why we don't accept ourselves and others, is because I don't measure up to my own idea of perfection, and guess what? Neither do you. You don't measure up to my idea of what you should be either. You ever notice that? When I'm not feeling whole, perfect, and complete, I don't see you as whole, perfect, and complete. And you don't see me as whole, perfect, and complete. And we do this dance out of this dream. And instead of saying, wait, what's the real truth? We keep on spinning and spinning and finding more reasons. But they're really good reasons. I mean, they're really good. Okay? Because we're really right about our reasons. You ever notice? You guys have. Anybody else ever notice? Sorry, I know it's a little uncomfortable. Take a breath. The antidote for all this? Oh, thank God he's getting to the antidote. Self-love. Do I love myself? Will I love myself exactly the way I am? I love the opening song. Do I love myself just as I am? Yeah, that part too. You know, the one where you said, well, yeah, except, it's that part too. It's that accept part. Will I love myself? Now, it doesn't mean you have to continue doing whatever that accept is, but will I love myself as I am right this moment? I haven't met the person yet who's absolutely walking the planet in perfect perfection. Even Jesus lost his temper and kicked the money changers out of the temple, cursed a fig tree. What did that fig tree do? It was out of season anyways. How did you expect fruit from an out of season tree, and then you got to kill the dang thing off? Okay? Now granted, he was teaching a lesson, but still, as one of my teachers said, it was Jesus' bad hair day. Because in one of the versions of the Gospels, he did both those things in the same day. It's sort of like he's having a really rough day. So he starts in, curses the fig tree, goes in, kicks the money changers out of the temple, basically throws a temper tantrum, walks back out, recurses the fig tree, by the way, and takes off. Okay? The Buddha used to spend 6 months in the sanghas doing the work with the people, and then would spend 6 months away in retreat recovering from that, recentering. Okay? So we all do this dream. We all have stuff that we're not always perfect. The idea of always being in perfect balance and perfect wholeness and perfect completeness is a myth if we're looking for what we think that it is, if we're looking for our judgment of what we think that it is. Our agreements create our view of who we are. Our agreements create our view of who we are. We can do or be this, and we can't do or be that. You know, 50 years ago, a woman couldn't, you can fill in a whole lot of blanks, right? Hold a job, work, be a boss. You know, to this day, there are still some people who don't believe that. You know, we talk about the glass ceiling and the disparity in pay with women. So there's still people who are playing with that myth. 50 years ago, a man couldn't be a house husband. You know, I took care of my older daughter for about a year. I hadn't lost my job, I actually quit my job consciously. And we looked, my wife had a really good job, we just looked at the economics, and I said, you know, I'm just going to take care of her for a year. It worked out economically, it worked out well, and we had time. But what do you do as a guy back in the early 80s saying, you know, whoa, what do you do? You know, at cocktail parties, what do you do for a living? I take care of my daughter. Oh, really? That's nice. To live fully, we must break our fear-based agreements. Most of our agreements are based on fear. Most of our agreements are based on the fear that we will be left behind, not accepted, not loved, kicked out of the tribe, and therefore die. And that's a big fear, isn't it? Most of our fears are based on the end consequence will be death. I'm afraid to lose my job or let go of my job. I hate my job. I've hated it for years. I feel stuck in it. I know it's a dead-end job, but I'm afraid to let go of it because I might not get a better one. In fact, I might not get anyone, and then I'll be left sleeping under a bridge and finally die poor, alone, penniless. Anybody besides me ever had that little track of thought run through their mind, okay? You know what it is. I'm tired of this. I know this relationship isn't working, but I'm afraid to leave it because, well, we've been together so long. We know each other, and I'm afraid that I'll never get anything better. Okay? All that stuff. To live fully, we have to break our fear-based agreements. Our fear-based agreements suck our energy. You can know when you're in one because your energy is, you can feel it dissipating. You can feel it being sucked out. Life-based agreements enhance our energy. When we're being our true self, when we're being our authentic self, and we've all had this experience, you feel enlivened, right? You walk away with more energy. I mean, you might be physically tired from doing something in an activity, but you're energetically jazzed. You've experienced this, yes? Or at least you know somebody who has. We can break our fear-based agreements. We have to be conscious about it, but we can break our fear-based agreements. And when we do, the energy that they've been sucking returns to us. When we finally say, you know what, I am not going down that path anymore, the energy that we have been wasting, that we have been leaking out, comes back to us. Yesterday I was working with a prayer partner, one of my prayer partners, and I realized underneath some stuff that was happening in my life, I had an agreement and a belief system that said things won't work out no matter what. The cosmic is going to pull the rug out from under me. No matter how good I am, no matter how good I perform, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my relationship, I'm going to lose my health, and eventually I'm going to die. Okay? It's that nothing's going to work out, and then so why bother? Now, is that a life-affirming statement? Do you think I feel like putting a whole lot of energy into life when I'm living in that consciousness and in that agreement? Do you think I expect to put a lot of energy into life? Okay? And I didn't. And I noticed where I wasn't, and I noticed how it was sucking my life away. And even when I was putting energy into life and where I was, it was still with that little, well, yeah, I'll do this, but. Okay? It's not a joyous experience. Can you imagine? Okay? And I've had this and I know exactly where I picked it up, from my childhood. Yesterday, we finally broke that agreement, consciously. Now, I've broken it on multiple layers before, but on a deeper level yesterday, we went right through and said, I'm not buying that again. Am I going to die in terms of will I lay my body down at some point in time? Yeah. But am I, the essence of who I am, the God's self of who I am I ever going to die? No. Heck no. So one of the Zen masters who was laying on his deathbed said to all of his followers who were crying, he says, why are you wailing and crying? Where do you expect me to go? So as I'm aware that I can put energy in and continue to get energy out and continue to live my aliveness, because I am an eternal being who continues to expand and express more and more aliveness, then I don't have to worry about that little agreement hanging over me that says the universe is going to pull the rug out from under me. And by the way, I don't really actually believe in that universe anyways. I don't believe in the malicious God, but somewhere in my childhood, and I know where, again, I got that idea. So we start to break our agreements, and when we break our agreements, we are freed in our energy. We have more energy to be living the life that is our life to live. Would you like that? Yes. Great. Me too. I'd like you to have that, and I'd like me to have that. So this week, I want you to do a couple of things. One, pay attention to your agreements. Pay attention to what I agree that I am. And what you'll hear and notice is those are very subtle oftentimes. They take place in the little subtle recesses of your mind. Something happens, we make a conclusion about what I am. I'm stupid. I'm not really good at this. I'm old. I'm a man, I'm a woman. I'm a this, I'm a that. You fill in the blank, and you've been filling it in for a long time, and somebody taught you to fill it in, right? Okay? Is it fear-based or is it life-affirming? Pay attention to my agreements of what I am. Are they fear-based or are they life-affirming? If they're fear-based, dump them. Now, what your mind will say is, yeah, but I don't know what will happen if I do that. That's fine. And that your mind is right. It doesn't know what is going to happen because it doesn't know how to be fully alive in that area because you never have been. But in order to get the experience of being fully alive in that area, you first have to break the agreement. We first have to be willing to take the risk. Okay? So break the agreement if it's a fear-based agreement. Number 2, practice self-love. When you're tempted to judge yourself for not being perfect, I know who you are out there. Stop it. When you're tempted to judge yourself for not being perfect, practice self-love and say, you know what? I don't like the way that I did that, and yet I still love myself. One of the things that Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in the first agreement, the being impeccable with your word, is it doesn't mean we take responsibility for our actions. We don't judge and blame ourselves. We don't bring out the hammer and start beating ourselves up for it. We do, however, take responsibility. So if I've done something that isn't the wisest, best, highest thing that I could have done, I do what I need to do to lift it up to that level. If I need to make an apology, if I need to do something different, if I need to make an amend, I do that. I take responsibility, but I don't judge myself. I don't tear myself down, and I don't continue to agree that I'm a mess up or whatever in life, and this just further proves it. Okay. So that's number 2. Practice self-love. Number 3, be impeccable with your word. Enter agreements consciously. Enter into agreements both with yourself and others consciously, and use your words to uplift situations, yourself, and others. Are you willing to do that this week? Yes. Pay attention to what I agree that I am. Practice self-love and dump the stuff that's not self-love, the fear-based agreements, and be impeccable with my word. Lift the energy up. Use it to lift the energy up. I'm going to close with a quote. You need a very strong will in order to adopt the 4 agreements. But if you can begin to live your life with these agreements, the transformation in your life will be amazing. You will see the drama of hell disappear right before your very eyes. Instead of living in a dream of hell, you will be creating a new dream, your personal dream of heaven. Would you be willing to live in a personal dream of heaven? In the previous service, he talks about, and I don't have it with me, we can live in a dream of heaven even if 1,000 people around us are living in a dream of hell, because we're immune to their dream. When we're living in self-love, when we're telling ourselves the absolute truth, the highest truth about ourselves. As a friend of mine says, if it ain't true of God, it ain't true of me. Okay? So when you're listening to yourself talking, you say, is this true of God? Is God stupid? Is God ugly? Is God, old, fat, whatever? Is that true of God? And if the answer is no, that's not the truth of God, then it's not the truth of you. So move into those agreements that are life-affirming. Let's move into prayer. So I know there is that one infinite presence, that pure love. Every mystic who's ever touched that infinite presence describes it as an unfathomably deep love. Far beyond any of our actions, any of what we judge and don't judge ourselves. It has no judgment in it. It sees only perfection. It expresses only perfection because there's only it. There's only this one life. Pure love, pure wholeness, pure joy, pure good. And we ourselves are one of it. We can't be outside of it because it is infinite. There's nowhere else to be but within this one life. There's nowhere else to be and nothing else to be but that pure love. We are that, whether we believe it or not. No matter what our dream is, there is a dream that is more true than that, underlying any fear-based dream we have. And all we are doing is letting go of the fog of the fear-based dream and opening to the truth of who we are. And so I speak my word that we do. We let go of that fog of fear. We let go of that fog of some small idea of perfection and recognize the perfection, the beauty, the love that we are and this world is right here and right now. The collective dream of the planet will try and convince you that everything is wrong about this world. And yet this world is God in form. And so we see the beauty, we see the perfection, and we increase the consciousness of that until that is the only consciousness there is on this planet, is to see and manifest the beauty and perfection of this world, individually as each of us, collectively as the whole world. So we allow ourselves to reveal what already exists, and that is that earth is heaven. Heaven is earth. This truth already exists. And so in this process, in this week, we're awakening to that truth and letting it fill us. Every cell, every thought, every idea, every word we speak, we use to empower this idea of heaven as earth, earth as heaven. Not in some far off distant time, but it is here, present, right here, right now, within us, as us. And so in great gratitude, I release this word into a law that moves it into form and experience, knowing the power of this word and the power of that law and the creative aspect and the influence of that law, knowing it moves in our minds, it moves in the fertile soil of our consciousness. It finds a home, takes root, and begins to show up in the most beautiful, perfect, and fabulous ways possible. And so it does, right here, right now. So we are, and so it is.